Morning, good afternoon, good evening. In 1980, for the 1980 elections, ZANU-PF left a number of the party's operatives in the field. Their campaigning slogan was, if ZANU-PF loses the election, the Bush War would continue. It is a historic fact that the people voted to end the war, or so they thought. The truth of the matter is, the people gave up their fundamental right to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country, to appease ZANU-PF. And the regime came back even stronger after the elections. In fact, within 3 years of the elections, they launched the Kukura. And at the end of it, the regime had even more power, and so was able to consolidate its iron grip on power. The bottom line is the people of Zimbabwe have been appeasing ZANU-PF for the last 45 years as the regime dragged the nation deeper and deeper into the abyss. Here is a scene in one of the movies illustrating the very point. This is from the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Clint Eastwood.
Was Carson dead or alive when we found him? What did he tell you about the money?
I don't know what you're talking about.
More feeling. You can sure consider yourself much luckier than your pal. Wallace will punch your friend as long as the song goes. So many of us have had a session in there. How's your digestion now? You'd better talk.
I have nothing to tell you.
Play that fiddle, you.
say about the money?
He's buried in a grave.
Where?
Saddle Cemetery.
Which grave?
I don't know. I don't know. I tell you. Blondie. Ask Blondie. He knows the name of the grave. Blood.
The war's over for you. Put those clothes on.
Why?
We're going for a ride.
Where?
To find $200,000. I know the name of the cemetery now. And you know the name of the grave.
You're not going to give me the same treatment?
Would you talk?
No, probably not.
That's what I thought. Not that you're any tougher than Tuco, but you're smart enough to know that talking won't save you.
That is the point. One needs to know that sometimes giving up the fundamental rights to appease the ugly is not going to save you. It will only make the ugly stronger, and they'll come back demanding even more. In Zimbabwe, we cannot deny that as much as the people try to appease ZANU-PF, the more we gave up, the stronger ZANU-PF has become, and the regime has always come back demanding more. The people gave up their right to a meaningful say in 1980. When the regime, when ZANU-PF operatives threatened the people that if the party does not win the election, the Bush war would continue. That should have set the alarm bells ringing in every Zimbabwean's head. If these people are going to deny us a meaningful say now, when they're not in power, what more when they are? Because that is exactly what happened. People gave them their vote. And as soon as Mugabe and company got their feet under the desk, they immediately sought to consolidate their power. The 1983 to 1987 Gukurahundi War was to consolidate ZANU-PF's power. The primary purpose of that war was to force the late Dr. Joshua Ngomo and his ZAPU colleagues to give up ZAPU and sign the unity accords with ZANU-PF, which they finally did in 1987, and thus cleared the way for Mugabe to impose the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country to this day. And throughout that period, since 1987, whenever ZANU-PF felt its grip on power was being seriously challenged, the party has never hesitated using brute force. And so we have had a history of ZANU-PF imposing its will on the people again and again and again. In 2008, SADC, the regional body, pressured ZANU-PF to include a number of electoral reforms to give the process some resemblance of a democratic election. One of those changes was that all the counting should be done at the respective polling station, and the results posted out. In 2008 was the nearest Zimbabwe has ever got holding free, fair, and credible elections. That is the March vote. And when the Zimbabwe Election Commission started to announce the result, it became clear that ZANU-PF was going to lose. And the party's reaction to that was to tell ZEC to stop announcing the results, and Mnangagwa and his Joint Operations Command colleagues, comprising the top brass in the army, in the police, the CIO, and prison services, took over. And here is Mnangagwa himself boasting of his accomplishment that year.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi yafona ndiri kwarusapi komo gwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvinhu gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
ZANU-PF has acted to consolidate its iron grip on power. In 2008 to 2013, the country had the best opportunity ever had to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU and end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. Mugabe used his political muscle. He bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends with the trappings of high office. And the MDC leaders failed to implement even one token reform. And so we ended up with a situation where ZANU-PF emerged out of the GNU with all of their carte blanche powers, including the powers to rig elections, intact. And ever since the GNU debacle, the opposition, MDC, CCC, have been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging, knowing fully well that by participating, they were giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. They've conned their followers to participate, lying to them that they have devised ways of winning rigged elections. The bottom line is the people of Zimbabwe really have not learned the lesson that trying to appease tyrants and, as to our friends in the MDC, CCC, sellouts, does not get us anywhere. One of the biggest problems that some of us have had is holding the MDC leaders to account. There are millions of the Chamisa Chete brigade out there who believe that the opposition are the country's only hope and they must be appeased. They will not accept that the opposition sold out. Some of them have grudgingly accepted that Chamisa lied to con people to participate in the 2023, but that doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Because Chamisa lied to con people to participate in the 2018 elections, claiming that MDC alliance has stringent measures to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. He was never held to account for that. Out of this background noise of we must appease him, and because he was never held to account for that, 5 years later, 2023, he was back selling this a similar idiotic lie that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. The truth is, MDC, CCC, particularly since the GNU, have been ZANU-PF Team B in all but name. They've been playing for ZANU-PF to Team A to win and to give Team A legitimacy. Right now, ZANU-PF is desperate to pass a constitutional amendment which will allow Parliament to postpone elections without recourse to the people. At the present moment, they cannot do that. Elections must be held regularly as clockwork every 5 years. But the regime is desperate to postpone, to have the power to postpone the elections because they want to avoid the 2028 elections. The regime is counting on many of its own supporters who will vote yes as the regime desires, out of the same foolishness of thinking that if we vote yes, we'll buy ourselves peace at last, not knowing that the regime will only become even more powerful. The regime is counting on its sidekick, the MDC CCC leaders, to con people to participate in flawed elections, in a flawed process, on the belief that they can win, they can have a no vote. The question that has got to be asked here is, why would you give up your right to free, fair, and credible electoral process because you've been persuaded to believe you can win rigged elections? Of course, that is foolish. ZANU-PF rigged the 2023 elections, as SADC and the AU election observers have testified. If ZANU-PF rigged the elections that were supervised by outsiders, what more of referendums where there will be no outside supervisors? ZANU-PF has an obligation to hold free, fair, and credible elections, or in this case, referendum. The people of Zimbabwe have got to be smart enough to hold ZANU-PF to account for that. It is ZANU-PF's obligation to make sure the referendum is free, fair, and credible. And given that SADC and the AU condemned the 2023 elections, I think it is not unreasonable for the people to say to ZANU-PF, before you go to the referendum, what reforms have you implemented to make sure that we don't have a repeat of 2023? For the people to say, unless we have got those assurances, we are not going to participate in a flawed process which you are going to rig, just as you have rigged elections in the past. Our biggest problem started way back in 1980, as I said, when we believed the regime and thought appeasing it would guarantee peace, economic prosperity, only to find that we had given up our right to meaningful say in the governance of the country. And the regime has, over the years, eroded our fundamental rights and freedoms to consolidate its stranglehold on power. The referendum will be the last act in that process. Because if they win the referendum, they will not have to bother about elections again. They'll just postpone them. I think this is the last stand, and we should be smart enough by now to know that appeasing the regime is not going to help us in any way. We can fight back by refusing to participate in a flawed election. We know the process is flawed. Indeed, we know ZANU-PF is already rigging the process because the regime is already bribed and corrupted the opposition politicians to make sure that it has got 2/3 majority in the House of Assembly and 2/3 majority in the Senate. And most of those politicians are already campaigning for a yes vote in the referendum. Yes, some opposition leaders like Tendai BT have said they are going to risk even living in the mountain while they campaign for a no vote. I think we'll be foolish to believe people like Tendai BT. The question we have got to ask ourselves is, Tendai BT was a minister in the GNU that failed to implement even one token reform. Mugabe bribed him and the rest of the MDC leadership, and they forgot about the reforms. ZANU-PF needs a team of opposition leaders to convince the people that they can win the rigged, flawed referendum process. As long as people participate in the referendum in their millions, the regime has got a chance of getting away with it. The last thing the regime wants is people to say from the outset, we are not participating in a flawed process. Let's correct the process first. ZANU-PF, as the government of the day, has the legal obligation to make sure that electoral processes are free, fair, and credible. Let's correct that before we go to the referendum. I think people like Tendai BT are not going to do the country any favors by advocating that we should give up the fundamental right to hold this regime to account by demanding that it meets its part of the bargain. I think that is the smartness that we have lacked for so long. We have got our own self to blame if ZANU-PF rigs the referendum and gets away with it, because we have been foolish enough to think that by appeasing them, we'll get peace, economic prosperity, and justice. I think it's high time we become a little bit smarter. The real fight here in terms of this referendum is to refuse to participate in a flawed process, to give up the high ground of demanding that the process should be free, fair, and credible. For the referendum result to have any validity, we must be satisfied that that was indeed the democratic wishes of the people of Zimbabwe. And that we can only be certain of if the process is seen and is in practice free, fair, and credible. ZANU-PF has never held free, fair, and credible elections. To think that they can do so now without even one token reform is naive. We do not want to participate in a process which, if we lose, will have no leg to stand on. In short, we should be a bit smarter. We were conned so many times in the past. We must be smarter. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.